Excitement is building as we get closer to production at the Toyota battery plant.
That massive $14 billion facility at the Greensboro-Randolph megasite is just weeks away from making their first shipments.
In the country, there's going to be a very good chance that your new Toyota hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or electric vehicle will be powered by a battery that comes off the line in this facility.
A subtle but meaningful shift is unfolding across North America's manufacturing landscape, and the signals rising from within the industry point to something deeper than a passing slowdown. The sense of confidence that once defined entire regions is beginning to loosen. Inside facilities that were long celebrated for their steady rhythm and predictable output, there is now a quieter tone, one shaped by changing expectations and the erosion of long-standing assumptions. Those who monitor the sector closely see these movements as early indicators of momentum building beneath the surface, one that could eventually reshape the scale and influence of the continent's industrial power. Nowhere is this transition more visible than inside Toyota's sprawling plant in Georgetown, Kentucky. For decades, the facility stood as one of the shining examples of global manufacturing excellence. Its output shaped the local economy, supported thousands of jobs, and supplied a sense of stability that felt unshakable. But this year has carried a noticeably different energy. Lexus production has been halted. The RAV4 line, once known for its consistent performance and dependability, is now operating at reduced levels. The machinery continues to run and workers remain on the floor, yet the atmosphere no longer carries a certainty that defined Toyota's presence in America for so long. Local businesses that built their futures around the plant's dependable rhythm are preparing for possibilities they have not faced in decades. The region's usual sense of economic reliability is beginning to fray. This pattern is not isolated to Kentucky. Similar strains are appearing in supplier hubs across the Midwest and throughout the southern manufacturing corridor. Companies linked to Toyota and other major automakers have begun scaling back hours, slowing production schedules, and resetting their expectation for the year ahead. Trucking routes that once offered steady, predictable schedules are now marked by pauses, with drivers waiting longer for loads that previously arrived without delay. Even state leaders, often eager to highlight industrial victories, have adopted more cautious language when discussing the current outlook. Many acknowledge that the pressure emerging across the automotive ecosystem resembles the disruptions that typically follow global crises rather than domestic economic policy. Toyota continues expressing commitment to its Kentucky workforce and has maintained its core operational framework. However, the broader supply chain surrounding those jobs tells a more complicated story. Metal fabricators, parts manufacturers, component suppliers, and tooling companies are all feeling the weight of declining volumes. And in an industry as interconnected as automotive manufacturing, stresses that begin deep within the supply chain rarely remain isolated. Early signs suggest that ripple effects are already moving outward. Much of this growing turbulence can be traced back to a major policy shift introduced earlier in the year. The White House enacted a 25% tariff on imported vehicles and automotive parts, presenting it as a strategy to rebuild domestic manufacturing strength and encourage supply chains to return to American soil. The stated goal was straightforward: protect American jobs, revive domestic production, and reduce reliance on foreign suppliers. But the economic picture that followed diverged sharply from those expectations. Research from the Center for Automotive Research revealed that automakers operating in the United States absorbed nearly $18 billion in new costs during the first year of the tariff alone. Production across North America dropped by more than 20,000 vehicles per day, and at one point the decline reached nearly 30% in a single month. The global automotive sector responded quickly. Companies such as Volvo, Mercedes-Benz, Audi, and Hyundai began shifting production footprint away from the United States or scaling back activity within American plants. Manufacturers that stayed raised prices to offset rising input costs. As a result, the average price of a new vehicle in the United States climbed above $50,000. Families that once viewed a new car purchase as achievable are now delaying decisions or turning to older used vehicles. A policy designed to strengthen American manufacturing inadvertently placed additional strain on many of the companies it aimed to support. Canada approached the moment from a different angle. Instead of tightening market restrictions, the Canadian government emphasized stability, long-term certainty, and open market strategies. That shift attracted global attention from automakers searching for predictable conditions, reliable energy supplies, and access to international markets. Honda responded with a transformative announcement, a $15 billion electric vehicle and battery complex in Ontario, supported by nearly $5 billion in federal and provincial incentives. The project is expected to create thousands of jobs, produce approximately 240,000 electric vehicles annually by 2028, and generate around 36 gigawatt-hours of battery output. The scale of this investment signaled more than expansion. It revealed confidence in Canada's direction and trust that policies would remain steady over time. Toyota has also expanded its Canadian presence, supported by trade agreements granting access to more than 50 global markets, including CPTPP and USMCA. Executive responsible for long-term planning point to Canada's clean energy resources, consistent regulatory environment, and broad international reach as key reasons for redirecting development northward. The results speak clearly. Japanese automakers now produce nearly half of all vehicles manufactured in Canada, totaling close to 930,000 units annually. Toyota accounts for roughly 500,000 of those vehicles, while Honda contributes around 430,000. Research centers and advanced facilities in Ontario and Windsor continue to grow, generating specialized engineering jobs that feed into a strengthening automotive ecosystem. Canada's cleaner electricity grid has created a meaningful advantage, lowering production costs by an estimated 20% compared to American plants, a difference that carries significant competitive weight. As Canada expands its reach, the pressure inside the United States has intensified. Toyota offers one of the clearest illustrations of the stress created by current policies. The company recently reported a global earnings drop of nearly $9.5 billion, while its North American operations entered a loss during the first quarter of 2025. Roughly $3 billion in tariff-related expenses played a direct role in that outcome. Executives responded by reducing the annual profit forecast by 16%, citing higher input costs, weakening demand, and a supply network still struggling to adjust to the new landscape. Industry sentiment has grown increasingly clear. While higher trade barriers may influence where companies invest, they do not strengthen the locations policymakers intend to help. As operating costs rise, plants that once ran full schedules now operate partial shifts. Suppliers reduce overtime, limit hiring, and in some cases shorten work weeks. Communities long dependent on auto sector stability watch their restaurants, hardware stores, and local shops experience slower traffic. Families who built their livelihoods on predictable factory hours sense a vulnerability that had been absent for decades. These challenges are amplified by structural realities within the U.S. auto sector. Nearly 40% of the value of an American-made vehicle comes from imported components. When tariffs increase the cost of those inputs, price increases ripple through the entire manufacturing system. Steel, aluminum, and copper, the foundational metals of vehicle production, have risen between 18 and 40%. This shift has added roughly $3,000 to production costs of each vehicle built in the United States. Hundreds of small and mid-sized suppliers, many of which operate on thin margins, have paused operations or temporarily closed due to part shortages and rising expenses. Even major automakers feel the strain. Ford and General Motors have reduced output by as much as 10%, while transport companies responsible for moving finished vehicles report their weakest shipment volumes in more than 15 years. Declines in transportation activity, always a reliable indicator of broader industrial health, reflect falling demand tied directly to production cuts. Communities once defined by full parking lots outside large assembly plants now see extended rows of empty spaces. Machines that once ran nearly non-stop sit idle during long pauses between production windows. Many industry observers worry that political promises centered on rebuilding American manufacturing cannot overpower the economic forces now reshaping the sector. Meanwhile, Canada continues widening its lead. Manufacturing plants across the country are preparing for higher volumes, and new investments are being secured with visible confidence. Policymakers emphasize predictability, renewable energy, and long-term stability, an approach that resonates strongly with automakers planning decade-long production cycles. Trade pathways linking Canada to Europe, Asia, and the Pacific offer access that the United States cannot easily match under its increasingly restrictive trade environment. Researchers warn that if these trends persist, the United States could lose up to a quarter of the North American auto supply chain by 2030. Canada, by contrast, may gain as much as 40% of the region's electric vehicle and battery manufacturing capacity. The shift is not arriving through dramatic announcements, but through steady, cumulative movements. Across the broader industrial landscape, the divide between the two countries continues to widen. Canada is leaning into global partnerships, regulatory clarity, and an investment-friendly environment. The United States is moving toward protective measures that introduce more uncertainty into long-term planning. One country is offering stability, the other is navigating frequent directional changes. Investors and executives increasingly highlight predictability as a determining factor. Canada is offering that predictability at a moment when uncertainty defines global manufacturing. The situation carries a striking irony. Efforts meant to shield American workers are instead redirecting investment opportunities to competitors. American plants are trimming shifts while Canadian factories hire. U.S. production schedules tighten while Canadian output expands. Manufacturers searching for reliability are simply following the path that leads to steadier conditions. Experts emphasize that decisions made today will shape North American manufacturing for an entire generation. The question facing the United States is whether policymakers will adapt in time to support long-term industrial growth or continue down a path that leaves companies navigating rising costs and declining competitiveness. For now, Canada's momentum grows with each new project announcement, further reshaping the regional map of automotive power. Recently, S&P Global raised a projection for light vehicle sales in both 2025 and 2026, citing stronger production levels and steady consumer spending. Analysts noted that household purchasing played a critical role in preventing a deeper contraction across the sector. Some specialists have suggested that early fears surrounding tariffs may have been intensified by speculation before real data became available. Even with modest optimism, industry confidence remains fragile as automakers approach the release of third-quarter earnings. GM, Ford, and Tesla are all expected to report double-digit declines in adjusted earnings per share. While each company remains profitable, the results reveal the pressure building throughout the year. Analysts believe earnings will likely meet or slightly exceed expectations because production stabilized above the lowest projections. Yet this raises a larger question. How long can balance hold when pressure accumulates from every direction, tariff expenses, supply chain challenges, and inflation continue